The IDF killed at least 120 Palestinians overnight in Gaza as attacks there continued. That's according to the Gaza Ministry of Health. Now, Plus 972, an Israeli news organization, is reporting, interestingly, Emily, that the Israeli intelligence is now using the Gaza Ministry of Health numbers in its own assessments. Early on in the conflict, they apparently, according to 972, surveilled the Gaza Ministry of Health, which the BBC and others still refer to as quote-unquote Hamas-run, to try to figure out whether or not those casualty figures being produced were accurate or not. They determined that they are accurate, and so now even Israeli intelligence is now using Ministry of Health numbers. Now, all of this is coming as there has been reports of a 2-month ceasefire offered by Israel and rejected by Hamas. John Kirby was asked about this yesterday. Let's play a little bit of sound from that.
Report that the Israelis have presented a new ceasefire, a temporary ceasefire for a hostage deal, about a 2-month pause to release all the hostages and the buys of civilians and soldiers. Can you confirm that? Is the U.S. engaged, as Brett's in the region right now, is he trying to actively sort of drum up support for that framework of a deal?
Yeah, I'm not able to confirm those specific reports that you're talking about in the press. Brett is in the region. He was in Cairo today, as a matter of fact, and he'll have other stops along the way. Certainly one of the things he's in the region talking about is the potential for another hostage deal, which would require a humanitarian pause of some length to get that done. And that's definitely on the agenda. He'll also be talking about a range of other issues, including humanitarian assistance, including getting assessment of Israeli Defense Force operations and protection of civilian life. I mean, there's a lot on his agenda. But I can't confirm these reports that those are the parameters of a deal that's being discussed. The last thing I'll leave you with is that, as I've said before, the discussions are sober and serious. Again, I don't want to get ahead of where we are or give you, I can't give you odds on if and when we'll be able to get there, but the conversations are very sober and serious about trying to get another hostage deal in place.
Now, Emily, Israel has not publicly confirmed that they made this offer, though the reporting is, strongly suggests that they did. Hamas has not publicly confirmed that they rejected the offer, though the public reporting suggests that they did. What do you make of both the offer and also then the rejection?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the Biden administration strategy is here, and I just don't have confidence in the Biden administration's strategy at all. I was actually curious, Ryan, what you made of how John Kirby handled that question, because when he said, "Oh, I can't confirm that those are the parameters of the deal," it sounded like he was saying those are the parameters of the deal. Mm-hmm. What did you think about that?
Yes, and the way that he finished it off by saying that the talks are sober and serious around upcoming hostage release negotiations does suggest that these talks are in a pretty advanced stage. I think one thing that is underlying all of these talks is how poorly the war is going for Israel in particular, and we can put up this next element here, which is the biggest example that we've seen. We covered this on the show yesterday. 3 IDF soldiers were killed in separate clashes, but 21 IDF soldiers were killed in a single incident. And I want to talk about that incident real briefly before we get into some of the other elements in this block. We now understand that so this happened on the kind of the eastern end of the Gaza Strip, only about 600 meters from a kibbutz that has been evacuated. The Israeli government has said that the reason that they were doing a controlled demolition in this area is so that residents of the Gaza envelope, and particularly in that nearby kibbutz, could eventually return. In other words, they're trying to destroy the civilian infrastructure to create a buffer zone. Now, a no buffer zone has been a line for the Biden White House. I don't want to say red line because they don't seem to kind of enforce any of their lines, but they have very publicly said that there can be no Gaza Strip territory that is currently Palestinian territory that is turned over, that is lost to the Israeli government. Separately, the Geneva Conventions, and one of the elements of the Geneva Conventions that Israel itself has ratified, says that you cannot kind of destroy civilian infrastructure in order to seize territory, which this very specifically would be doing. So this incident, which has become a massive scandal inside Israel, we now understand was being performed in furtherance of what is objectively understood to be a war crime.
So we have also, don't we have some further elements, Ryan, that get to this point, just so that people can see what you're talking about here? Sure.
And let's talk about some of the other kind of things that have been emerging that continue to turn people against this war. The attacks continue on Khan Yunis, which apparently is something like 500,000 plus people are now huddled in Khan Yunis, one of the second largest city in Gaza, but a place that Israel told people to flee for safety. Let's play this clip here.
In the yard of Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, Gazans bury their dead on Monday as Israeli warplanes drone overhead. They're unable to reach the cemeteries. Israeli tanks storming the main city in Gaza's south have reached the gate of this and another hospital. In the bloodiest fighting of the year so far, Abdul Karim Ahmed says he went through this at the Ashifa complex in Gaza City a few months ago, where he also buried loved ones.
We're besieged from all sides. We're reliving the same scenario again and burying them in the yard of the Nasser hospital. There is no safe place, no way out.
Inside, the wounded, desperate and stricken crowd the wards and corridors. This is the only major medical complex accessible in Khan Yunis and the largest still functioning in Gaza. Rabiat Salim's injured family waited until morning for an ambulance. My mother was alive and told me, "Don't worry, go grab the others." But she's gone now, he says.
Another war crime allegation that has been breaking through, if we just run through this as well, into the Western press, has been the IDF desecration of cemeteries throughout Gaza. So the Times of Israel here reporting IDF said to heavily damage 16 Gaza cemeteries during military operations. There's been a lot of reporting in the Israeli press on this, but CNN too witnessed this. As it's the only way, except for that kind of one CNN reporter who was able to get to a UAE-run kind of field hospital, has been through kind of embedding with the IDF, and so you would expect that you're not going to get a whole lot of reporting about Israeli war crimes when you're embedding directly with the IDF. However, listen to what CNN saw as they were rolling through with Israeli forces.
CNN witnessed firsthand the results of Israel's bulldozing of graveyards while embedded with Israeli forces last week. The armored personnel carrier CNN was traveling in drove right through this cemetery in Al-Burej on a freshly bulldozed dirt road.
So we have 120 minimum Palestinian civilians killed. We have the desecration of these cemeteries, punching through into the Western press. We have the 21 IDF soldiers killed while trying to create a buffer zone, which the United States has very explicitly said we do not approve of. And my sense is that one of the reasons that there was this rejection of this initial offer is that Hamas must feel that the war is not going very well for the IDF. What's your read on it?
Yeah, I have exactly the same read on it. And that's why I thought it was helpful to put all of those things, for everyone to see those things together. Because when you think about that, I have read or heard that, a lot of those 21 IDF soldiers who were killed were reservists. They have families, just an awful thing. And so that question of, from the perspective of Israel, is everything that we are doing in this war, if they're thinking about it like that, is everything that they're doing making Israelis safer now and in the long term? Is this justice? Is this making us safer? And when you look at all of that, it reminds me a lot of what we were talking about with the Houthis last week, Ryan. The Houthis saying, basically, we're enjoying this. Bring it on. Escalate the war for all we care. We wouldn't mind if you escalated the war. It's like that's not being factored into, at least publicly. It doesn't seem that's being factored into the Israeli decision making, the strategy, because it's like they're prosecuting a war where they expect Hamas at some point to be the word they use is annihilated. Well, Hamas, you can't annihilate Hamas like a traditional army. And listen, like I'm armchair quarterbacking this from the United States, and Israel knows that, but the strategy doesn't reflect it. It doesn't seem to reflect it, because if your goal in all of these, bulldozing of cemeteries, and Hamas does embed itself within civilian infrastructure, but of course Gaza is tiny and densely populated, and all of that. But if your goal is to annihilate Hamas, and this keeps these examples keep happening, it's going to get a lot harder, I think, to continue selling this war, not just on the international stage, but even at home, as your own soldiers are dying. The further that it gets from October 7th, then the sort of sense that this was a just response that's going to make us safer now and in the future. I think that that case gets a lot harder to make. The more you see Hamas sort of responding like the Houthis have. You've seen like the leader of Hamas abroad say, to the extent he said something to the extent of like, this is going great for us. Like this is, since October 7th, we've realized that we can get away with a lot. They're not a traditional military. So it's not the same thing. And I just don't understand. I guess I understand, but I don't think it's going to be easy to sell this in the future.
Right. And on the one hand, it's awfully cynical to me of Hamas leadership to refuse pauses because of the extent of the suffering that the civilian population is going through. But at the same time, right, just as there seems to be no coherent strategy coming from Israel at this moment, there seems region-wide to be no coherent strategy coming from the United States. There are reports now that the U.S. believes that there will be so much pressure on shipping as a result of both the Houthi attacks and the U.S. response, that it will raise shipping costs for China, and then China will then exert its influence on Tehran, which will then exert its influence on the Houthis, and will get the Houthis to stop firing missiles at ships, which is, most global strategies you talk to are like, that's absurd. Like, A, China can't do that. B, China isn't going to do that because China is quite fine with us creating this gigantic morass for ourselves. Separately, as even Voice of America, which is the kind of U.S. military-run news outlet, reported, the Houthis have been very clear that they will allow Russian ships and Chinese ships and any other ships that are not associated with the U.S. or military effort, U.S. or Israeli effort in Gaza. They're letting those pass. They're letting those pass. And so the idea that you're going to get China to jump in and bail us out of our own airstrikes in Yemen. And by the way, we launched airstrikes yesterday on Somalia, claimed self-defense there, more airstrikes on Yemen. We also launched airstrikes at the Iraq-Syria border. And our own bombs were falling in Gaza. So if we creeped across that border, that's 5 countries that we bombed in a single day, which has got to be approaching a record. And it's leading to actual pushback in the United States Senate. And yesterday there was a letter, we can put up this next element here, from a bipartisan group of senators. It's Mike Lee and Todd Young, the Republicans, and Chris Murphy and Tim Kaine, who are considered to be very serious Democrats. This is not the peacenik wing of the Democratic Party. And they write, we believe that American participation in another war in the Middle East cannot happen in the absence of authorization by Congress. Unless there is a need to repel a sudden attack, the Constitution requires that the United States not engage in military action absent a favorable vote of Congress. Does your administration believe there is legal rationale for a president to unilaterally direct U.S. military action to defend ships of foreign nations? So, Emily, Todd Young and Mike Lee, how much pull do they have in Republican quarters? Could we see kind of a genuine bipartisan coalition coming together and pushing back here?
I think we'll see a genuine bipartisan coalition, but I don't think it will matter because if you look at Senate leadership, they have absolutely, these are not people who care about these extremely serious questions about war powers. And this coalition and everything that you just read that they said is absolutely accurate. It's absurd that we are so numb to how these wars are prosecuted at this point. And Mike Lee and Todd Young are heavy hitters. They actually are, well-respected, well-liked, serious conservatives. They're not McConnell lackeys, but they're also, not they're not considered, like media celebrities or anything like that. They're not like on Fox News every day. That's all I'm trying to say. They are serious people, and that's what's really sad about this. It doesn't matter. Because as you know, Ryan, you've been covering this way longer than I have. The blob always wins in these conversations about war powers. So I'm glad to see a bipartisan coalition. And I'm glad to see that it's not just sort of relegated to the fringes. Matt Gaetz, for example, speaking of the fringes, like Matt Gaetz has actually been very good on this, even in relation to Somalia. Going back a long time. And so to have someone like Mike Lee and Todd Young making this case in the upper chamber is important, and it's great. I am just so thoroughly cynical about this making much of a difference going forward.
Right, and speaking of some of these atrocities breaking through in the West, wanted to close this segment with incredible reporting from I-24, an independent news outlet in the UK, which is kind of set up 70 years ago or so as sort of a competitor to BBC. They had an I-24 cameraman in Gaza who carries out a bunch of interviews. And let's roll this, and I can narrate this for some of the people who aren't able to watch. Correction, I will not be narrating this because this is a SOT. So let's roll this from this news clip from I-24.
As he moved forwards towards the combat zone, he noticed this group of men doing their utmost to appear non-threatening, trying to proceed with care. They wanted to reach two other family members and get them out of harm's way.
عند الحجة وأخويا وعنده حوالي 50 نازح أو 70 نازح موجودين في البيت الثاني اللي يخش علينا اليهود طلعونا وأخويا ما طلعوش بدنا نروح يعني نطلع إن شاء الله.
The interview complete, our cameraman walked away. And then this happened. The interviewee had been shot and fatally wounded. You can see them place their flag on his chest. As he was carried away, the white flag was turning red.
And so it's pretty self-explanatory if you could hear the narrator, but you see a group of men who are waving a white flag trying to get from one part of the area to another to help to escort out some of their other family members to safety. And then out of nowhere, kind of shots rang out, and one of the men who was just being interviewed appears to almost die instantly. And as they're carrying him away, in this indelible image, they place the white flag as something of a bandage on his chest, and you can see the blood soaking through the white flag. His wife is not far away from him, and she soon after this clip ends, she realizes what has happened to her husband, who was just trying to go help some family members. She collapses into unimaginable grief. And while that's happening, shots continue to ring out, and you see all these children around these men who are kind of looking left and right, trying to find somewhere where they can go to hide, but it's not exactly clear, where they're getting shot from, and where they can go. And all the while they're trying to find some way that they could get this man who's just been shot help. This comes, of course, just a few weeks after the IDF shot and killed 3 escaped Israeli hostages who were waving a white flag. And so there doesn't seem to have been, following that incident, any reflection whatsoever on how to respond to unarmed civilians who are wearing white flags. The fact that this aired in a Western country, in the UK, Emily, do you think that this type of incident has the potential to break through, or are the camps just so dug in at this point that defenders of Israel are going to continue to see catastrophes like this as the equivalent of, victims of an earthquake or a hurricane? Can't really tell who's responsible.
And that was ITV, not I-24, right?
Oh yeah, did I say I-24? Sorry. Yes.
Yeah,
ITV.
Yeah, ITV is British, right? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah,
I-24,
no, and I mean, obviously,
ITV. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's yes, and so again, that's where I do think these images are powerful in the Western press, and I actually think, again, like I was watching a podcast interview that the foreign leader of Hamas, who's is sort of media facing, people have probably seen some of his interviews that he's done, is talking, I think just in the last couple of days, about how they've been somewhat, what's the right word, surprised to see the reaction or the lack of support, the support for Palestinians in the West, the lack of support for Israel in the West, and that's a good thing for Hamas, and that you can see it sort of empowers Hamas. And to that point, I'm not trying to say that doesn't mean people should support Palestine. What I am saying is that what he's talking about is how people are reacting, I think, exactly to clips like that. And it does. The one thing he's right about there is that does make that difficult for Israel. And listen, like, I don't want Hamas to be in charge of Gaza. I want to see Hamas annihilated. The idea, though, that Hamas is going to be annihilated if you just do operations like this enough, where you have people with white flags, or you have where people with white flags get caught up, or you have civilian infrastructure, because Hamas has some hundreds of miles now, through reporting, we know hundreds of miles of tunnels. You're not going to annihilate Hamas, and then what next? We've talked about this, right? And say that is accomplished. If you annihilate Hamas, what's going to come into that vacuum that is better than Hamas? If not, the United States, who's providing essential support in this war, believes in a two-state solution. Netanyahu and the people that Netanyahu is answering to in his coalition do not believe in a two-state solution. So actually, none of this makes sense for the future. Like the strategy, the more these clips are played in the midst of this strategy, I think the more difficult it does get for Israel. And that's the bottom line. Like, I actually think some of these soldiers are, I don't want to minimize the difficulty of their situation. And I don't know, but this looks horrific. I mean, it looks horrific, and likely is horrific. And so I think the longer this goes on without a really clear strategy, I think it actually also will get more difficult to continue selling to the Israeli public as a whole, because even far right people, and I say that they would obviously want an escalation in the war, but even some of the people on the far right in Israel aren't happy with what the end goal seems to be.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.